And here he is, my shipmate, Bryan McGrath. Welcome, Bryan.
Thank you, Gene. It's great to see you.
I am thrilled to have you on the show. Bryan, I know what you're doing and what you've been doing, but not everybody does. And we have people from all services and some people who are not even associated with the military who listen to the show. Can you tell us, what are you doing now?
Yeah, I mean, the now name of my job is that I am a defense consultant. I run a one-man shop. I have less than 10 clients, a mix of government and industry. And I essentially get paid to help them communicate, to help them think, to help them make strategy. And specifically on the business side or the non-governmental side, I try to give them the benefit of my operational experience and the time that I've spent deeply thinking about conflict, especially conflict at sea and from the sea, and how that should affect their portfolios. That's how I make money. I have a side passion, which is writing, thinking, speaking about the importance of sea power to the United States of America, the centrality of sea power to the United States of America. Those two pursuits are they combine with each other, right? So I write stuff all the time, and people out in the world like that stuff, and then they say, "Well, will you come and help us?" And then I talk to them, and sometimes we come to agreement on that.
Bryan, I want to poke around at two themes that I think just emerged there.
Yeah.
One is, you said you make money by helping companies think and communicate.
Yeah.
No, that sounds easy on one level, but tell us why that's not so easy.
Well, it's very interesting. My impression, and I have one man's tiny little consultancy's worth of an impression, but my impression is that by and large, the government has a problem thinking about and communicating with industry. And that is, there is within the government far too much of a sense that industry is a bunch of rapacious capitalists who just want to take us for all of our money and maximize their profit. That is absolutely wrong. And it is, by the way, it is the thing that I see in retiring naval officers, talking to them 2 years later. It's the thing that I see most that they've turned on, that they've come around on, that now that they've been out in industry for a while, they see, oh, these really are good Americans. They're trying to do good things. The second thing that I help from the opposite side is I help industry understand what the government is saying, or what the Navy specifically is saying when it speaks. And I help my corporate partners, especially when they're talking about capture efforts, I help them understand what their own biases are and the degree to which those biases come out in how they communicate with the government. And they communicate in RFIs, and they communicate with their offerings, and all that sort of thing. One major problem I see is that often, most of the time, the government would like their requirements filled for the cheapest possible price. That's generally speaking what and I often run into clients or to capture teams and the like who are like, yeah, but we have this great new idea where we could go blah, blah, blah. And I go, yeah, that's wonderful. They don't care. Give them what that stuff happens before the requirement comes out. But once the requirement's out, once you see where they're going, give them what they want for the best possible price.
Bryan, it would seem that I'm going to get to the second part of this in just a minute, but it would seem that for a company to acknowledge that it needs help thinking and communicating, that there needs to be some degree of self-reflection on their part or is it more correct to say that you have to help hold the mirror up to those companies and point out that they need you? How does this come about?
One doesn't work without the other. You cannot make progress with an executive who isn't willing to be self-reflective. And those exist. I've been, and I have, I'm sure you have too. I have broken off relationships with clients simply because.
Put lists in the show notes. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Just because it's like, hey, you guys, you want me to tell you that you're doing a great job. You don't want me to tell you that you might want to skate in this direction. So self-reflective executives are incredibly important, and overwhelmingly, that's what I run up against. They're open to it, and the truly talented ones are the ones who are willing to understand that their structure, their culture, their organizations may not be optimized for the objective that they seek, and the ones that are willing to listen. They don't always change. In fact, they rarely, just say, all right, well, we'll set up a new structure because McGrath says we ought to. But the fact that they're willing to understand it, and they understand that I am coming in this, they're going to pay me whether they take my advice or not. Right? It's not, there isn't. I don't get paid by the successful idea. So that they would sit and listen to me and give the ideas thoughts, and then sometimes dispense with them. That's a mark of maturity on their part, and sometimes I'm not always right.
I find that those that tend to be more able to self-reflect also recognize that people like us have exposure to the insides of multiple companies. So that an executive might rise through one or two companies, maybe a few companies, but not dozens of companies like we have been able to interact with in our time after active duty. Bryan, I want to just jump over to the passion you described about talking and writing and speaking of the influence of sea power. I know this has been a longstanding passion, but where do you think that stems from on your part, and what reinforced in your mind that there was a void that needed to be filled by a voice like yours?
Well, whether there's a void or not, or whether I'm filling it, is entirely up to the listener.
Well, I would offer just as examples. You have a role with Hudson, a major think tank.
I used to. I don't anymore. I'm not
okay.
Yeah.
So that ran for a number of years.
Yeah.
You are publicly on platforms with the Navy League, for example, speaking on sea power. You're a regularly quoted source in defense media on naval matters. So you're most certainly filling a need. But I'm just trying to get at where did you determine that you're as qualified as any to speak with authority on these issues?
So there were two formative experiences. The first was 1997 and 1999. I was the speechwriter for the Chief of Naval Operations. I did not want to do that job. I was brought in for an interview, and at the end of the interview, Admiral Johnson said to me, "I understand you're not a volunteer." And I said, "That's right, sir." And he says, "Well, welcome to the team."
Oh, he was such a classy guy too.
I really enjoyed working for him. But what I got there was I got to stand behind the guy that was running the 500,000 person Navy, then 350 ships or whatever it was. I got to be in the room where it happens, like they say in Hamilton. If my clearance was high enough, Admiral Johnson allowed me to sit in the back of the room and listen. That was driven by a minor confrontation we had one time where early on I was writing a speech and he said, you're just not listening to me. And I said, Admiral, where would I have heard that? And he said, well, it was in the KEB the other day, CNO Executive Board. I was like, I don't get invited to that. I don't hear those things. And he said, that changes today. And I could just go and sit in any meeting as long as my clearance was high enough. So it was the speechwriter job, number one, but then number two, several years later, Admiral Mullen was looking to stand up a new process for discerning a maritime strategy. He gave that task specifically to Vice Admiral Morgan. This was the 2004 to 2006 timeframe, or I mean 2006 to 2008 timeframe, and Morgan hired me to be the main pen and the team leader for this Coast Guard, Navy, Marine Corps process. And in the course of that effort, we reached out to industry, to Wall Street. We were all over the place, and I kept coming into these rooms with very impressive people with $3,000 suits, and finding myself thinking, I can do that. I can think like that. I have the ability to synthesize and discern. And so when I decided to leave the Navy, I had this sense of myself as someone who could synthesize and discern, because I had just written a maritime strategy with a team of very talented friends and helpers. And I thought I got things. I thought I got where the Navy fit, where it wasn't fitting. And so over the course of the next 15 years, that Greek flag has flown, and I just run with it.
For those that don't know the career path of a naval officer, so we know you commanded an Arleigh Burke destroyer, USS Bulkley, but ashore you're describing some exposure opportunities that work in two directions, right? When you're identified to fill a role where you're serving senior leadership, those senior leaders tend to recognize that you as a junior officer or rising officer will one day be a leader in the Navy, and there's great learning that takes place by being exposed to these kind of opportunities. But it's a step that's maybe an order of magnitude further for you to have embraced and internalized the message to the degree that you recognize that you're the one who can carry it with authority out in the public square. So speaking to industry now, many years removed from active duty, but you've maintained a hand on the tiller, so to speak, and you're a voice that people turn to and listen to. It's quite impressive, and I would offer it as an example for others to take note of. Everybody has some form of expertise that is developed and nurtured in different ways, and you've just done a spectacular job of that.
I don't sing, I don't dance, I don't hit straight 300-yard drives. I think, I write. I probably don't listen enough, but I listen, and I synthesize. I was recently honored to be named as a commissioner on the National Commission on the Future of the Navy that should be kicking off here soon.
So Bryan, if I may.
Yes, sir.
There's that I left out when looking for social proof of why I say you're filling a void. I left that off the list.
Whether I'm filling it or not.
So by the way, that position that you just described, in your case, was bestowed by the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, not just some nobody out there, but somebody extremely influential in defense policy.
Yeah, and I, when I got a phone call early in the year asking if I was interested, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Am I interested? This is the dream. If I am going to get to spend a year asking a lot of inconvenient questions, which is what I do for a living. I ask inconvenient questions of people who know the answers or should know the answers, and in the process of answering it, help move either my own understanding of the problem in a better direction, or their understanding of the problem and its answers in a better direction. So this, I look at this opportunity as this, it's the perfect place for my operational background, and then what I've done since then to sort of come together in a way that might be useful. And I'm hoping that we can be useful.
We were talking offline about some of the challenges that the Navy and the Department of Defense are facing writ large, and have always faced to some degree, but the challenges change and take different shape. I wonder if you could just comment about how you're able to balance supporting multiple needs out there. So I know you have certain relationships with industry clients. You have some relationship with the Department of the Navy or Department of Defense. Here, you would be filling a role that is a congressional role. Are there some firewalls that a consultant needs to put up, or how do you make sure that you're serving people without overstepping any boundaries that might be expected?
Well, there are certain boundaries that are just, they're not negotiable, right? Pre-decisional. If information is pre-decisional, then it's not shared. It's not shareable. Obviously, recent current events notwithstanding, if it's classified, it can't be shared.
Oh, you can't do that with your mind?
No.
You can't take care of that. I thought it was something that you could just think about. You've mentioned the word think many times. I thought you could think your way through that.
I didn't mention declassify.
Okay.
So there are strictures that are, they're regulations, they're legal, and ridiculously close adherence to that. Don't even swim up close to the edge. Is one way. Number two is that you have to be brutally honest with your clients when you're saying, this is my opinion. It's informed by this understanding, but I am not representing Admiral, General, Secretary, blankety blank. This is my opinion, and it is the synthesized goodness of my work. Now, this congressional commission they may change that. They may be, at some point, someone may come to me and say, well, you can't work for this person, that person, the Navy, whoever, and then I'll have to make a decision as to whether it's worth it for me or not. But the bottom line is, right now, well, for instance, when I went through the interview process for this commission, they asked me who my clients were. I said, here's all my clients. I told them how I do my business. My business is, I am not going to advocate. I do not advocate for things that I don't believe in. If you are, like, if you were someone, for instance, if there were a company that made, just makes submarines, and that company, part of its commercial strategy was Navy surface ships are obsolete and aircraft carriers are obsolete, and they wanted me to help represent them, I'd tell them to go get bent because they're wrong, right? And so that's I build my business around my own personal vision of what a strong, powerful Navy and sea power enterprise looks like. If clients come to me and they fit into that pre-existing mold, then we have an opportunity to talk.
Bryan, I want to shift gears a bit and get your observations on our our current state of military readiness. I've written a little bit of late about our policy, our stated policy to support Taiwan, and I believe there are some questions about our ability to do that without some substantial loss or certainly risk. And I think there are reasons to question our current state of military readiness. I wonder if you have any observations.
Like like most things in life, you get what you pay for, and our level of readiness is what we have paid for. Our level of readiness is a reflection of 33 years of post-Cold War tuning of the industrial base, tuning of the force structure, tuning of the fleet architecture, so that we could have as little as possible to do the job as it is understood by the administration in power. There is a very, I think, a very important and almost slavish addiction to efficiency. And we had, and in that pursuit, we've given up capacity, redundancy, effectiveness. And so we have maintained, this is a great line from the Lockheed Martin CEO at the Reagan Forum last year. We have maintained a defense industrial base that was appropriate to efficient peacetime acquisition. And we have maintained a military that was sufficient to managing a peacetime global order. I think the industrial base and the force that it supports are insufficient to the times. I think we are not as ready as we need to be in the near term, what a lot of people refer to as the fight tonight. We're not as ready as we ought to be, and we will suffer losses in excess of what we ought to be suffering in an exchange with a peer competitor because of that lack of readiness. I do still think, I do still think in a scrape with the Chinese, they come out of it worse than we do. I think my shorthand for this is we lose carriers, we lose ships, we lose thousands of people. They lose their Navy.
Let's back off of that for just a second.
Sure.
If I could go back to the word tuning.
Yeah.
Do we have instruments that allow us to tune with such precision? How do we know when
we
things are?
We like to think we do. We have incredibly smart analysts, operations research people who do models and modeling and Monte Carlo runs and all sorts of force on force engagements. And
I'm sorry. Let me put that on apply tuning to the right thing. You indicated that we had tuned our readiness and tuned the industrial base. That was my interpretation. Do we know when readiness is dialed in, or does it reveal itself in ways that tell us, we need to make a change? That's what I mean. What's the instrument by which we're measuring?
By which we know if we're ready?
Yeah, in tune or out of tune. I think we're out of tune right now.
We're out of tune. The various communities have different ways to measure the material readiness of submarines, airplanes, surface ships. The stories are not great there. We have They have to make reports to Congress. The Board of Inspection and Survey report was just made to Congress. The GAO studies things like surface ship readiness and have come up with bad news.
Yes. So those are both, I have referred to those in some of my my writing and talked about them. The GAO report was May. The INSERV report was June. These are very fresh documents, but those are the tools. That's how we know it.
And we also have the experience and wisdom of the people we pay and put 4 stars on their shoulders, and they continually tell the Congress about their concerns about readiness. There is a really unfortunate theater of the absurd that goes on. We rightly prize civilian control of the military. We promote men and women to uniformed levels of great responsibility, and then we consider it insubordination when those uniformed military people report to Congress and tell the unvarnished truth.
So we have a very high-profile example of that right now with the Commandant of the Marine Corps publicly disagreeing during a hearing about the need for amphibious ship numbers.
Whether we're talking about ship count, ship numbers, readiness for the force, the 4 stars do the very best they can within the box that they're given. And they are given boxes by the Secretary of Defense, by the Secretaries of the Armed Services, by the President and the National Security Advisor. When an admiral goes up to the Hill, and you remember this from your days, the standard answer is, "I support the president's budget."
Or else
poppycock.
Or else what?
Well, or else the inmates are running the asylum. The uniforms are getting out from under civilian control. Norms are violated, and 10,000 social science PhDs are born talking about civil military affairs. It's gotten to the point where there is way too much theater. We're in a terrible place in that the overwhelming majority of the people I know who know these things believe the Navy is too small and the Navy that we have is insufficiently well maintained for the things we wish that we ask of it to do. The CNO tries to do as best he can within the rules of the game that are played, but ultimately, I just don't think the depth of the problem is well understood.
Maybe you could help us better appreciate either the condition or the need for what was once described, I think it was Gordon Adams coined the term, the iron triangle of industry, congressional committees, and the agencies of the Department of Defense. How does that tension help or hurt what we're trying to achieve?
What it does is it guarantees that we are going to overspend to achieve any level of military readiness. We will always overspend because the process that we have in place to determine budgets and then get those budgets passed is ultimately a political process. It's not an analytical process. It's not a math problem. It's a political issue. And so what we do is we paper over differences, and we reach compromises by excesses. In a perfect world, that wouldn't be the case, right? But we don't live in that perfect world. We live in this republic where the Congress has an Article 1, Section 8 responsibility to provide and maintain a Navy. They are a political body. And so you have questions of jobs, questions of pride of place coming from, and also quite extensive experience. I mean, there are people on the Hill, on staffs and in elected capacities, who really know what they're doing and have been there a long time and have seen guys like you and me come and go.
Well, some people comment on budgets being political documents in sort of a derogatory way, but what you just described is the essence of how the process is supposed to work.
It's absolutely that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's absolutely that. I am an ideological conservative. I have for years been persona non grata in certain conversations in that crowd, because I'm a fan of congressional ads, earmarks. I believe that earmarks, number one, were a wonderful lubricant for the machinery of government. Number two, it was a wonderful way to incentivize good behavior and to punish bad behavior among members. And number three, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that much money. My problems were with the appropriated funds, were with the it's with the stuff that went all the way through the process that I had the problem with. The earmarks is like, that's chicken
I did
feed.
see it as a tool of government to help the system work. If you look at the earmark moratorium, which was 2010, 2011, that's about when the very, very harsh ideological divide began to truly reveal itself.
And it was when the first debt ceiling agreement resulted in sequestration. So you had a double whammy.
Correct. And the lexicon of defense versus non-defense spending
defense and non-defense discretionary. I love that. Yeah. It's all discretionary. That's the point. That Congress can change entitlements, but they don't.
Let's touch very briefly as we wrap here on the industrial base. The industrial base has been contracting for the past 10 years. The clear documentation shows that. The exact size of the industrial base is somewhat a dynamic number, but it's ironic that coming out of COVID, we had millions of companies apply to start up and be their own businesses, but they don't seem to be coming into the defense industrial base. And we see private equity, we see acquisition, we see some companies leaving because they just can't stand the competitive nature of the process, or the nature of the competitive process, I should say. Do you have some observations about what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of money to be made in non-military manufacturing and software, and there's lots of places to go where you don't have the barriers to entry. The barriers to entry, as you talk to your clients, I talk to my clients, the barriers to entry to selling something to the U.S. government are immense. They really are. Now they're navigable because people do it every day. But when you can sell your software process to banks and insurance companies and just print money, without all of the rigmarole that you have to go through to apply that kind of technology to the fire control loop, for instance, within a destroyer, you're not all that interested in getting into it. Now, there are some companies that are trying to break that mold, where they're high-tech Silicon Valley kinds of companies who are saying we want to play in this, and I am watching them very closely because I think they have something to offer. I just hope that the Department of Defense and the federal government recognize that they're not going to be there forever, and they'll vote with their feet. If we don't become more responsive in the way we buy things.
There are many software and service companies who are doing their darndest to change the system from the inside out by showing up with such value at such good price for what the capability is that they bring forward. And I agree that there is a limit to how long they will poke around at it. Bryan, just to wrap up, we've been in industry for about the same amount of time. We served together on active duty, as some know, not in the same ship, but we served at about the same time. If we were to get together for another conversation like this in 5 years, what do you think we'd be talking about?
I think we would be talking about a larger DoD. We are going to have to get out of our own way. So there will be more money. And again, as we discussed earlier, that additional money papers over inefficiency. I think the system will become more efficient. We simply are getting smarter and better at processes and process management. And I saw an interview with the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the guy who used to do late night comedy. I forget his name now, but he was giving her a lot of business about the audit of the federal government and how the
John Stewart, I think, was the
John
interview.
Stewart,
Yes,
yeah. And I think she handled that interview poorly, very poorly. But the bottom line was, I think she had a good story to tell. She just said, "Hey, we're getting after this, and the federal government is trying to get after this. They're not just letting it go. They're trying hard to figure out where this money has gone, because no one really has asked that of them in previous times." So I think 5 years from now, I'm optimistic. I think things get better. I think things get better with more resources, and I think things get better with better management and technology. I mean, I see things every day through my clients and through how data is applied to myriad tasks, whether they be operational or readiness. This data revolution really is going to stick. And I know I'm a history major. I'm not a data scientist or anything, but I look and I go, yeah, this is actually good. We're actually going to get somewhere out of this. We may actually begin to be more efficient and effective, which would be Valhalla.
Mark your calendar. We're going to come back in 5 years and have this conversation. Bryan McGrath, thanks so much.
As long as my yacht has internet or satellite, not the yacht I have now because I don't have one, but the one I have by then.